evening, Dr. Howard. It's indeed a pleasure to have you finally on board after all these days of back and forth emails. I'm really in gratitude to you for accepting our invitation and taking out time for us. On behalf of the entire Rishi Samskriti Vidya Kendra, the team of Manoj Lekhi ji, and all the participants who are eagerly waiting to hear you, I welcome you on everybody's behalf. And before we go ahead and listen to you, I've been given the task to read a formal introduction for you, though there is a lot that can be said about you, but I have tried to keep it very short and simple. So just allow me to go ahead with that. So Dr. Howard Eisenberg, he's an MSc in psychology, MD. He's a medical doctor with postgraduate training in both psychology and psychiatry. He has been a lecturer at the University of Toronto and an associate professor of medicine at the University of Vermont. He's also the CEO of the international consultancy Sintrek Incorporation. On a more personal level, he has been on a passionate lifelong quest to discover the true nature of reality. He was awarded the first postgraduate degree in Canada at McGill University for his highly successful parapsychological research on telepathy. He then pioneered the instruction of parapsychology as a regular credit course at the University of Toronto. Almost half a century ago, he authored his first trailblazing book, Inner Spaces, Parapsychological Explorations of the Mind. His new book, which I can see right away tagged in your library, that's Dream It to Do It, The Science and the Magic, is the culmination of his successful quest to learn how reality works. Dr. Howard, welcome you once again, and we all are really excited to have you with us. Over to
Thank
you,
you so much.
Manoj.
Thank you so much, Sarika. Thank you.
Yes, namaste, Howard G. I will call you, as we said. That's our way of giving the respect to you and
Thank
your
you.
work. And everyone is eager to hear you. So you can start with a short, your short journey, I would say. And I would just like to share about, we met some time back before we all started. And in that few minutes which I was with you, Howard G, it's just you're very extremely warm and welcoming, and I think that speaks a lot about the work you have done, doing, and continue to do. So everyone will have a wonderful connection with you. We had one with Dr. Bruce Lipton some time back last month, and he also, we said that definitely we are waiting for him to come here and address us in person. So we have done also my master, Sri Rishi Prabhakarji, as we heard, our master, our Guruji, we call him by love. He left his body in 2014. So he has given us this opportunity and this platform, and we are just spreading his message. Just for your idea, like I told you, we are about 150 people staying in the hills of nearby Pune, and with about 90 children, 60, 70 adults, and we are like a community having thousands of people all over, and many of them will join us here right now. All eager to wait and hear from you. We have done a lot of work on consciousness, beliefs, thoughts, and uh, on that angle. Of course, exercise, pranayam, and meditation is part of our culture and healthy food habits. So let's hear your journey, and then we'll make a spontaneous question answers. And we're eager to hear about your book also and everything what you do. Yes, you can start.
Thank you again, Manoj. Thank you. Namaste.
Thank you.
I really appreciate this opportunity to share my teachings, and I will try to start with an answer which is more comprehensible, simple. I was, as a child, very curious. I wanted to understand things. And as a child, I became aware there were many different people who had different understandings of things, even like religion, for example. Ironically, people would believe often that the faith they were born into was the only true one. And even sometimes worse, that not only was it the only true one, but the other ones were all almost wrong and evil, and even to be, fought, eliminated in some way. So as a young child, I was just aware at a very basic level that people's basic belief at the time was so different, yet we're in the same world. And I became interested in reading science. I became interested in testing things out. Um, so I looked at things through a so-called Western scientific mind, if you like,
Yeah.
um, which assumed that reality was out there, and with our various instruments, we would increase our understanding of being able to work with it for the well-being of humankind. And I was pursuing this path and also became a doctor, a medical doctor, because I was interested in medicine just to learn so much about how we are composed physically, how we work internally, and also a desire to help people. So I chose medicine as my vocation. But again, I was very curious. So I was also curious about working as a teacher in the university. So I also became a professor. I was curious too about even the world of commerce. I thought at the time that the world of business, in a way, was applied science. You had a theory of what service or product might work or how to advertise it, and it either worked out for you and you earned profit or didn't. I thought it's kind of scientific. Um, so continuing on this stream, and I also became a corporate consultant working internationally, helping people. I call it performance enhancement, being their best and working at their best collectively. I call it collaborative intelligence. But then, more recently, a few years ago, I was invited to present a keynote presentation to a group of the annual conference of a group of healers. They call it therapeutic touch. The Western Bible refers to it as the laying on of hands. In Reiki, as you know, it's working with energy and another level of source. Um, I did a very deep dive at that time into all of the scientific literature in parapsychology, in modern physics, in comparative religion, in indigenous teachings, and even some of the discoveries with the psychedelic drugs, which is undergoing some of a renaissance in the West right now, for good and bad. Um, and I became interested too in going deep into philosophy to understand how we understand things. What does it mean to understand things? Still looking at it with a Western lens, but then all of a sudden, after doing this deep dump for a couple of months, within minutes, I suddenly had a revelation and I had an understanding which was totally contrary to my previous understanding and the conventional one of what we call reality.
Right.
And in that, I realized that the outside world is not external, objective, and even in a way our source at all. It's in a way an illusion, a projection.
Beautiful.
And that was followed by a bit of an emotional crash. This is all very fast, within maybe probably less than a minute, into an extreme sense of almost panic. Then, if it's all illusion, then I'm all alone. This is not good. But then quickly, it progressed very, very quickly, in seconds probably, to the realization I'm not alone. I'm connected to everyone
Yeah.
and everything. And
Yes.
after that, my life was changed.
How many years back was this?
This was in 2018.
Oh, just 5 years,
So
huh? Wow.
not
Great.
even quite.
Yeah, this is a old in India. We have been brought up with this understanding only. Aham
I
Brahmasmi and
know.
Masi and Sarva. I mean, that is like the moment we are born, we have been fed with that belief, but now we are all discovering that. I mean, it's a belief, but we are discovering it and making and letting it be an experience. That's a very whole different chapter only.
It is. And then, for the experience part, once I had this understanding
Hmm,
that we are all connected
right.
and became more concerned about the fragility of the world on this level, because to me, there's different levels of the reality. This is one level. We call it
Right.
sometimes consensual reality, the one we
Yeah.
sort of agree on. Uh, I like even Shakespeare's way of putting it. We're all players on the stage,
Absolutely.
on this
Yeah.
level, you know. Um, but with this, again, sudden understanding, revelation, that we're all connected in the fragility of the world around us,
Yeah.
I I then began to receive a sense of mission that I have to speak out. The book which we were talking about, it came
Yes.
to me almost like a dictation. It was it. from the beginning to the end of putting my manuscript, sending it to the editor to be checked until it was actually available to the world, while I was still being a doctor and also having some medical issues I had to attend
So
to.
was it a
5 months,
flow?
5 months. And when I had a narrator who I hired to do an audiobook version of my book. It's a woman from England, a BBC, former announcer, very, very different. And purposely, because it's not about me. It's what's come through me, what I think the world needs to know now. And I thought it would be good to have someone with a different voice. I also realized the message of the book, in a strange way, is perhaps more feminine than masculine. So it was appropriate to have a woman do it. However, when I first listened to her recording, her narration, my book, it was a very strange experience for me. I was like, did I write that?
Did I write it?
Are
I was
these my
just
words? No, it was very interesting. So again, it was another sort of
Wow.
confirmation, like this is coming from another level.
Yeah. I got your words when you said, when you paused, I said, did I write it? And it was like a more of a flow. Uh, like,
Yeah.
yeah, many a times we wonder, I mean, after writing that, did I write this? So it's so beautiful to have this flow. And this
Yes.
comes with a lot of silence, with a lot of understanding, with a lot of depth of introspection of, are we are we who we are, what we think we are, like I say, I am Manoj, I'm Dr. Howard. So these identifications is where we lose it or we get it.
And yes, and as you remember, the chapter heading of my second chapter in my book is the only thing you can absolutely know, which is way beyond the ego.
Yeah.
I'm actually, if I have the time, I've started working on another book, which I think is very critical right now in our world on, in a sense, managing the ego, because
Wow.
that's what's messing everything up.
Yeah.
This sense of distrust, of competitiveness, of greed,
Right.
of insensitivity to others. It's
In
all from our ego.
in our words, we just say ego is just as simple as identification. I'm identified to this role called whatever, like now, right now, this director or this
Yeah,
organizer or Manoj or director
yeah.
or businessman or doctor or there are so many roles although, I mean, one part what we always say is that ego is not bad, but forgetting that we are nobody is where we lose it or we gain it, that we lose the
E-
awareness.
Exactly. I mean, I think it's not just an accident. There's, so to speak, a reason, or I should maybe there's value, there's benefit in this level of our reality. However, balance is important in life. And if we can enjoy to a degree at this level our individuality and the color we can bring into the world and the
Beautiful.
variety of life and the way nature expresses itself,
Yeah.
this is good. When it slips into something different, and because we are in that level somewhat sensing ourselves as being separate from everybody else and nature around us, when we get carried away with emotions in that separation of like suspicion, not
Hmm.
trusting because we sense difference, or greed and envy, we want what they have, and then going to war and or
Oh,
on a
yes.
minor level, even theft. Um, that's when we're losing it. So if we keep the balance of all cooperating to better enjoy well-being and taking care of this blessed planet we live on,
Yeah.
then all would be good.
In fact, Guruji would always say that in the name of peace, there's maximum war.
So
So,
ironic.
yeah,
And simply with religious crusades to save people, they would kill them.
yeah. So, what's this book about, Dr. Howard ji? I mean, the crux of this, dream it, do you do
To
it?
do it.
Yeah.
So I came to the understanding in this revelation that not only our repeat is the material world illusion and our separation illusion, but I came to realization of why we have this experience and where it's all coming from. And this is what I felt I had to write in my book to wake people up. I called it a global wake up call. The world as we live in it right now, on this level of our consensual reality, is in great danger. It's in great peril in so many ways. And I don't want to become dark and depressing, but we know there's two major wars going on right now in the world as we're speaking. Um, Climate change is not theoretical. Even in just the last year alone, it has caused so much damage in so many parts of the world. So many people are being uprooted because of climate change and political problems and the great migration of people leaving their native countries because they have to for various reasons, destabilizing other countries. Uh, there's nowhere in the world right now where you can have totally clean water that's free of microplastics. The sperm count of men around the world is going down, which is needed for the continuation of the human species on this level. I mean, I could go into so many different examples. Um, the United States, which was a beacon of democracy for so long for many in the world, is now on the verge of collapsing as a democracy within just less than a year. Um, these are not normal times as we previously have experienced them on this level, and it's very perilous for the continuation. The doomsday clock is now set at 90 seconds before midnight, which is the product of the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists, international esteemed scientists who look at the probabilities of critical world disaster, which could reach extinction level, and midnight represents that symbolically. That clock now is just 90 seconds before midnight. So I felt I have to speak out and wake people up. We have to stop this entrapment in this
Mm-hmm.
almost virtual reality of material separation. It is not the way for well-being. It is not the way for peace. It is not sustainable. And we don't have very much time. It's critical that we wake up and we realize our commonality, the root we have, and how we could live so differently.
So dream it till you do it. And the science and the magic, does it have anything to speak about manifestation, like you dream and then you can get,
Yes,
yes, so
yes.
can
So
you expand on that a little bit?
in this revelation, I understood, as I put it, I connected the dots. It wasn't so much that I felt I made some new, like, major scientific discovery uh, in that sense myself. I don't mean it quite that way. It was the realization, it was the understanding of how it all connects together. For example, the latest research in modern physics is totally confirming what the ancient mystics
Absolutely.
of India discovered and what you have in your Vedic texts.
Right.
It's like exactly, it's like a one-to-one, 100% correlation.
Yeah.
And yet one came from the mind, in a sense, and
Right.
opening up to another level of awareness. And the other came from the outside, apparently material world with these very sophisticated instrumentations and the same understanding. So back to your question on manifestation. So I realized fundamentally everything, everything comes from imagination.
Right.
All the things that humankind has ever discovered, created,
Mm.
came from imagination.
Absolutely.
And we are often taught that we shouldn't waste so much time daydreaming, pay attention, be serious. But it's imagination that is the source of everything we ever come up with, either individually or collectively as cultures in the history, of humankind. And where does imagination come from? It comes from consciousness. But does it come from our consciousness, like the ego consciousness, the individual consciousness? No, it comes from a much deeper level. It comes from source. So I'm obviously condensing a lot of complicated concepts very, very quickly. Even my book is one of the most information dense books ever
Wow.
published. And I've been told by others, like, wow. And
Uh,
they reread it and a whole other level,
is,
emerges.
is it a lot
Um,
of science in it also, in terms of science?
in more ways than one, yes, because I also talk about the latest brain research, as well, on how the brain works.
Yeah.
Um, it's, as I said, it was a very deep data dump I did, and it's very, very inclusive.
Mhm.
But back on manifestation. So if everything comes from imagination, then you manifest, to put it very simply, we can go into it in more detail. You manifest things, that is, you bring things forth into what seems like reality by imagination. And the more vividly you are able to imagine things, the more likely you're able to bring it forth. Now, I will qualify, and I'll go back. You asked about science and modern physics, quantum mechanics, particularly.
I'll just say
So
Guruji's quote.
quantum mechanics.
Guruji
I'm
would
sorry.
always say, Guruji would always say that the difference between what's the difference between a man and an animal? So the big difference is man is has the capacity to imagine, and and go beyond imagination, transcend also imagination. That is through the process of meditation. So that's the difference. And lot of people who get just stuck to just a concept and a belief, then they are living more the mundane life rather than exploratory life, that way. Yeah,
That's right.
continue. Yeah. So you can continue that science and
So again, coming back to some of the sciences, give some examples. Einstein is considered as one of the most brilliant scientists, a genius. And his mathematical formulations like equals mc squared, how energy, light, and matter all, are related, and time is warped and so on in space. But he began his interest, his discoveries of cosmology, of how things work in the universe, at the age of 16 by imagining what it would be like as an experience if he could ride a beam of light through the universe.
Mhm.
So it was working with his imagination, not with these physical, instruments, and collaboration with other scientists. Um, Nikola Tesla invented most of the infrastructure of our modern electrical systems. He even, by the way, and most people don't know this, and we're going back now over half a century, he even predicted the cell phone
Mhm.
as it is, as a pocket device that would allow you instantaneously to have audio and visual communication with anyone and any in the world.
Beautiful.
He was taught, as you may know, by a yogic master, and he produced all of his inventions by detailed imagining in his mind, and not only imagining it as a physical sort of still object, but fluid, operating, like turned on, activated, so he could fine tune it and see how it would work before he actually physically had it produced.
Mm.
And again, most people don't know this, but that, as I say, I used to think of myself as a scientist dealing with material reality, but everything we've discovered came from within. Now, for manifestation, there are some steps, and if you like, I can go into that.
Yeah,
But I want
briefly you
but I,
can go into it. Yeah.
okay, but I need to qualify too. So we know in quantum mechanics that we
Yes.
live in what we call a probabilistic universe,
Right.
and I say there's so much complexity in this.
No, we are
So
familiar with quantum mechanics and quantum
okay,
theory. We are very, very familiar with that. And
so good.
we are
So as we understand it,
99.9999%
mhm.
energy and matter, that everyone is familiar with this in this audience.
Okay, so
Yes.
in particular, what I want to draw the attention to is that when we go down and try to find the ultimate constituents of what we call matter, the ultimate particle, so to speak, we find there are no basic particles that are fixed in time and space at all. All we can find at the very finer levels, the more subtle levels, is what we call a probability. It's actually
Right.
called a wave of probability. And it needs the act of conscious observation, but somewhere in the chain of the scientific discoveries, for
Mm.
someone to observe it. So when someone is observing the instrumentation, we call it collapse of the probability wave into like a particle.
Right.
So
From a
my point is
from a
that,
state.
but the point is it's probabilistic.
Hmm.
Okay, so it's not like you could say with manifestation, if I do all these steps, I will absolutely have, what I set out with. It's probabilistic. You increase the probability substantially
Right.
for a favorable desired outcome.
Hmm.
But it's not like turning on a switch off and on,
Yeah.
and it's
There is
important
no
understanding.
there is no guarantee about anything in the world. That's what it is. That makes the world so interesting, the mystery. Yeah.
That's right. It's always moving, always
Always.
evolving. So to try to come back to your question with manifestation,
Yes.
so we have to start with what is it we desire,
Hmm.
and hopefully with good intentions,
Absolutely.
not to say to take from somebody else.
Hmm.
And then we have to go into a level of awareness. I call it being able to feel, to access the spaciousness of consciousness, the source from which we all come.
When you
So
say good,
it's opening up internally.
when you say
Partly,
good, when you say good intentions, can you elaborate on that? What do you mean by that?
well, if we choose something competitively to advance ourselves over others or to harm anyone else,
Right.
then we're veering more into the world again, the illusion of separation that we get captivated by.
So
So we
you're
lose
saying
our,
anything which is inclusive, coming out of inclusion, anything coming out of togetherness, sharing, caring. That's what you mean by that.
yes,
That's what we
yes.
say that otherwise, a lot of people, in this, there are a lot of books which have been written on manifestation and the power, the law of
Hmm.
attraction. And
Hmm.
unfortunately, people think that, just by writing it down and then visualizing it will happen. And we say, no, it is law of vibration, law of resonance, law of
Hmm.
when we say vibration resonance means we mean that if it has the intention of compassion, love, togetherness, sharing, inclusiveness, then the probability, as we say, increases dramatically. Otherwise, the manifestation does happen, but what we don't want, that's what
Hmm.
starts. Wherever we focus energy is where it expands.
That's
That's
right.
so.
They're very
So
important.
I always call it a game of awareness. Are you aware of what you are thinking? That means thinking of what you want. Are you focusing on what you want or what you don't want? Or in other words, complaints or appreciation. That, so you can share a little bit on that also in terms of gratitude and love and all those things.
Well, I could go into a whole other level with love because if you want to come back to that, because I could say some very important things about that, but trying to continue on the manifestation. So to have the desire, to have the awareness and allow yourself to go within where there's no limit, it's infinite, the source, connecting to source. Then having intention, you have to have something as a goal, if you like, that is in your mind. And then imagination to color it in, to embellish it, to make it seem more vivid, more realistic as something that would be out there. And then you need belief, but it has to be, how should I say, true belief,
Yeah.
not hopeful belief. You,
Right.
you, you know,
Knowing belief,
it
a knowing belief.
Yeah, it's like sort of beginning with the end in mind, or to use, a figure from fiction from the Star Wars movies, Yoda, who says, do or do not. There is no try. Like it has to
Yeah,
be like a
absolutely.
total belief. The example I use is in some martial arts, we teach students and even young students to smash a wooden board with their bare hand.
Uh-huh.
And the trick is not to hit the wooden board. The
Mm.
trick is to go beyond and through the board. So again, power of belief, and even in medicine, placebo effect. If you believe in
Right.
something, can
Abs-
benefit you. And then the final step is the disciplined focus, like a
mm,
laser. No
Right.
other thoughts, no other distractions, just
Mm,
very intense. And it can be very fast. It's not necessarily something that takes a long time.
mm.
And it can manifest in many areas of our life without us realizing it. When we wish to do something that we have not done, that perhaps the people around us have not done, and we end up doing it, even that is a level of manifestation in this level of our reality. And I have many examples of this in my background that now I have a totally different understanding of how I did some of the things I did at the time.
In fact, Dr. Howard ji, we have been given the gift from our master Guruji, who we call lovingly. So, gift of samadhi. Samadhi means dhi means buddhi, and sama means samatva. So, when the intellect transcends dualities, that's called samadhi, and that gift we got. So, there's no Indian translation to samadhi, but I mean, no English translation to samadhi,
Hmm.
but the best closest word which we use often is meditation. But meditation is, many people use it as mindfulness, many people use
Hmm.
meditation as concentration. So we use the word samadhi means equanimous intellect. So we teach all the people who are here, most of them are familiar, that we tell them something called creative visualization. So what we do is very similar to the steps which you said is first of all, go into the equanimous state of intellect. When you're in that state and you're going to come out in that alpha or delta state as we go advanced, but at least alpha state, then you're going to get up. We have been doing this for years together. I said, now instead of getting up, that's the time you put your intention, then imagination, and then, as you said, discipline every day at the same, more or less at the same time. You keep on visualizing with the true belief, as you say. But true belief, when we say, is it's not even a belief, it's a knowing that is happening. It's rather, it's not even happening, it's already happened. You
Yes.
see that way with a beautiful smile.
Hmm.
Immaterial of the real manifestation or no, that doesn't matter, because you're
Hmm.
already satisfied, you're already complete. And then you visualize, imagine, and when you come out of that state, you are absolutely at peace, because whether it happens or no, you have already received that uh, outcome of it.
Hmm. Hmm.
So that's what we
Hmm.
teach them.
Hmm.
Many of them do it, many of them don't believe it. So a little bit on that you can share. They don't do it, they
Well,
don't practice also, many of them. So
I think, another thing we talked about just briefly to come back to it too is, because it's so important, is love. So I always knew love was important on, again, this level of our consensual reality. It's a good thing. It feels good. People like it. Um, but I came to understand through this revelation back in 2018 that it really is, at a fundamental level, so much about source. When you feel a loving connection with someone, you're connecting beyond your individuality, your sense of ego. Like, for when people fall in love, for example, they often, if they are able to, they love looking in each other's eyes, and they don't even have to talk. They just really enjoy looking in each other's eyes.
right.
Um, and you can experience sometimes as adults, even when you see babies, even though they don't know you, because the babies look at the human eye. They prefer to look at the eye. And sometimes, they just smile, and the person is maybe a stranger. They also feel this and they smile. So this is a connection. And when people feel romantically attracted to each other to a degree that they want to share their lives and marry, again, they feel this, that their best friend, um, more complete. Um, but then ego comes in, and they get into conflicts. Why don't you do it my way? Why does it have to be your way?
My way or
Can't you
highway?
ever change? And so on, right? You're taking more than me. Don't be so selfish. Don't control me. Um, and then you get more and more into ego, more and more into individuality, more and more into the world of separation,
Mhm.
and you lose that connection.
Absolutely.
So love is incredible. And when you're wanting to help someone who's in need, uh, in a healing way or a compassionate way, it's love that is doing so much of the goodness. And even I mentioned at that conference where, it precipitated my revelation of the therapeutic touch practitioners. It's working with energy when you're feeling a loving connection. And even in some of the parapsychological experiments we're doing, you're imagining a connection with some instrumentation, and it affects the instrumentation.
I wanted to ask that question, that parapsychological, what do you mean by parapsychological? Can you explain?
So yes. So parapsychology itself refers to the area of science where we study some of the extended human capacities, both receptively, what sometimes was called in the past ESP, extrasensory perception.
Mhm.
More specifically, today we would call things like telepathy, mind
Right,
to mind, direct contact,
right.
clairvoyance or remote seeing, an awareness of things at some distance that you can't see with your normal eyes,
Yeah.
precognition, an awareness of things to come in the future that you have no way of otherwise knowing. And on the other side of it, things that are expressive. We call it PK, psychokinesis. Again, laying on of hands would be one example of it. Somebody visualizing, affecting a random number generator to show it can, have some power to take it off random output. Again, that's an expressive quality. That's, again, PK. psychokinesis. So parapsychology is a study of these extended capabilities.
Okay. Can you expand a little bit on telepathy and even clairvoyance?
Yes, my research at McGill University for my master's degree in psychology, and it was the first degree in the country for research in parapsychology fields, was on telepathy.
Okay.
And in that experiment, I set up a situation where I had a controlled way of stimulating one person, we'll call him the sender, and I, in this case, I chose several minutes of different motion picture films. Some were very pleasant, beautiful nature scenes. Uh, some were the other end of things, like literally even murder in a movie. Um, so it was quite a variety that I would show to them. And I won't go into great detail, but they were in a large concrete building, modern building, on two different floors of the building. The person who was the sender was separated not only by the floors of a building with concrete walls, but no windows. The doors were locked from the outside. So there was no way to explain how someone watching a movie would be able to transmit that information to somebody else who physically was totally isolated from them. And we chose very different types of movies and we randomly chose them. And we found a very strong correlation between what the so-called receiver thought they were receiving and what the sender was actually watching while they're watching a movie. So this would be what we call, again, telepathy. Examples of this in real life are like when a mother, for example, suddenly maybe in the middle of the night wakens up and something's wrong with my child, and that child may be on their side of the world, and they just suddenly had a sense they were in an accident or something even more serious had happened, and they had passed on this level. Um, Telepathy is also very often experienced between mother and child, where they have this unspoken communication. And sometimes we can experience it with some animals, particularly what we call household pet animals, where you get that sort of connection where you don't need words. And it's not because they see your body language. There's just a
Actually,
deeper sense.
this happens to many of us randomly,
Hmm.
here and there. Like I think of something and it happens there, or
Hmm.
someone thinks and they see it, or this has happened many to many of us. But is there some science you have discovered behind that, or have you
Of course, because
some
uh,
behind that?
well, first, in terms of the science again,
Yeah.
discovery that everything fundamentally is connected. So
Hmm.
parapsychology is one of the more recent of the sciences. It only goes back a couple of hundred years or so, and it's one of the more controversial ones because the main consensus in science today is that there is an external, independent, physical, material reality.
Right.
And parapsychology is fundamentally challenging that and saying, no, it's incorrect. It does not correspond to the research data. So, for example, in the material world, we know that energies decline with distance. It gets weaker and weaker as you get further and further away from whatever the source energy is, whether it's light, whether it's sound, whether it's heat. But the further away you are, the weaker it is, so to speak. And
Right.
it's we can even express it mathematically. But telepathy can happen anywhere in the world. Uh, the lunar astronaut Edgar Mitchell, who went on to found the IONS Institute of Noetic Sciences, which is one of the main centers now for parapsychology research, did telepathy experiment from the moon to Earth. Distance doesn't matter,
Right.
so this is not compatible with this understanding of physical forces. Also, back to your question too, with clairvoyance, which is another form again of what we study in parapsychology, or sometimes called psychic phenomena as an umbrella term. So in clairvoyance, you have an awareness, so to speak, visually, of something at a great distance from you. And when I say great distance, it could again be literally on the other side of the world. It could
Hmm.
be in a bunker, which is like reinforced with concrete and steel. It doesn't matter. There is no barrier to it. So this again directly contradicts this notion of physical reality with solid things and solid borders that separate things.
Yeah. So plasticity, neuroplasticity, you were saying. So I heard this terminology first from Dr. Joe
Hmm.
Dispenza, then from
Hmm.
Dr. slipped in, and then various other books which we keep on reading. It became it's a familiar term to me and many of us here,
Hmm.
but a little bit on that, on the brain you were saying, and also decoding reality, as you said. Yeah.
So on neuroplasticity, I was fortunate that one of the eminent scientists I worked with earlier in my education, McGill University, was actually D.O. Hebb, who came up with an expression: cells that wire together, meaning brain cells, the neurons, fire together. They become somehow connected in a pattern. And this is what we now call neuroplasticity.
Right.
And I do talk about neuroplasticity in my book because it's another form of proof that our understanding of reality is wrong. So, for example, in conventional science right now in medicine, it is just assumed that the physical brain in our head is the source of our consciousness, and it is not. And there are many reasons that I prove in my book it is not. I'm just connecting the dots. But to come back to this question in particular, one way that, again, it sort of proves, as with parapsychology research, that the model of understanding we have reality is wrong, is because if the brain was producing consciousness, our mind, our thoughts, then how is it in neuroplasticity that if we change our thoughts, we physically change the brain? So for me, that's the fascinating part of neuroplasticity. And that's that we can sort of, improve ourselves or change ourselves. And it has that application and that benefit. But more fundamentally, in terms of, again, decoding reality, it's another form of proof that is not the material brain that's the source of our consciousness, of our thinking, of our free will.
Mhm.
The mind is something over and above it. It's more like the mind dreams up the brain than the brain produces the mind.
Mhm. Yeah, these are very, very, what do you call it? Uh, Complex terms. We use it interchangeably: the brain, the mind, the universal mind, consciousness. These are
Mhm.
very, everyone interprets it differently, but definitely, there is a universal mind, the consciousness, which is beyond the brain. Brain is just an instrument which serves us. And
Mhm.
how does repetition uh, fit into neuroplasticity? Because by
Well,
repetition,
so if you think in terms of just, habit formation,
right?
um, it takes repetition to develop a habit. So, for example, if you want to be in better physical condition and
Mhm.
exercise, it takes a discipline to do it. If you weren't,
Right.
uh, and unless you do it consistently, repetitively, you don't get be more fit. You may occasionally do some exercise, but it does not increase your strength or your endurance or your
Right.
flexibility. It has to be consistent.
So
So
what does
back on our
consistent? How do you weigh consistency in all the practices which you have written, suggest, and otherwise?
well, the consistency requires discipline,
Right.
and one way to help people develop discipline, other than just trying, which is willpower, because maybe we'll say, I can't diet, or I can't control my spending, or whatever it might be. That's not really in their interest or other people's interest. So it's about
According to you,
discipline.
according to you, why people are not disciplined? Because I found that is one of the diseases in the world. Diseases, when I say disease, it doesn't mean a disease, but
Yes.
you are not at ease. When we are not disciplined or when we are not consistent, then we find our lives not at ease. So we call it dis-ease, that
Yes.
way.
And I like that terminology. I used to write DIS with a / ease, to make it more visual for
Right.
people. It's a
Right.
lack of deep ease. Yeah. So I agree with that.
Manoj, can I just have a quick question here? Since
Sure,
since
sure.
Dr. Howard, you were saying about neuroplasticity and about the
Hmm.
firing and wiring. So
Hmm.
I read this term in one of your, like, the stuff that you had sent me, the
Hmm.
plasticity of conventional reality.
Hmm.
So is what you were saying just now just exactly refers to this,
Well,
the
yes and
plasticity
no.
of conventional reality?
So that is one example of it, in a minor way,
Mhm.
but I mean it in a bigger way, going back to manifestation. I mean, we really
Okay.
can change not just the course of our lives. We can change potentially if we allow ourselves to believe and realize it, and feel it, and work with it, we can change this whole world that we're living in right now,
Yeah.
and quickly.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
So
Okay.
it doesn't have to be this way. It's plastic.
Yeah.
I like your terminology, the world behind the world. You know,
So
so
when I talk of source,
yeah,
it's like, where's it coming from? It's coming from the source.
right.
And that's available to all of us because we're all connected. We're all extensions of source.
Absolutely. So you can share about how thoughts becomes things. That's a very famous uh, in the Secret movie, they have this thing. Thoughts are things, if you have
Yeah.
seen that.
And of course, in conventional science, we're taught the opposite, that it's totally different. But it is correct, because it said everything comes from imagination, in a sense, thought. And if we work with that and bring it to manifestation, it becomes a thing. So even, for example, my book, this revelation came to me, this information, this way of even giving examples, even the phraseology, the way my voice as an author, if you want to put it that way, which was all very different to me than I knew it before. Um, so it started as an awareness and consciousness, and then thoughts of putting it into words and writing it down to become a book. To come back to medicine, I think is a good example of this, so scientifically, that many people I hope can relate to. So in medicine, we have something called the placebo effect,
Right.
sometimes also known more popularly as sugar pill effect, where we give somebody what they think is a medication. And it may be a pill, it may be a capsule, it may be a syrup, a tonic. If they believe that it really will help them mentally, physically, even though it's chemically without power, it's we call inert, like just plain sugar, not a pharmacological drug. However, if they believe it from that thought, that the doctor, nurse gave me this, so it's a medicine, it will help me, then more often than not, they actually get better. They get a benefit, even though there was nothing physically, chemically that's responsible for it. It was their thought, their expectation, their belief that manifested into that benefit in this level of material reality. So, that's another example of it. When I mentioned Nikola Tesla, who invented all of the electrical devices of our infrastructure, first it was just pictured in his mind, but then he brought it into the world physically, where we
Right.
all now use it throughout the world, his inventions.
So
So yes, thoughts do become things.
doctor, you were saying about placebo. I was told there was one medicine in
Hmm.
US which is maximum sold as a placebo only. I don't know the name. I don't remember the name, but I just remember that it is called that it is means people just take it and they become okay, but actually there's nothing in it. And it's officially
Hmm.
sold that
Hmm.
way.
Well, that's what we mean by placebo in medicine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So our belief in the doctor or in the medicine or in the theory or in that particular concept itself starts making it happen.
Yes, and it is even been true, believe it or not, in surgery, where
Right.
they sometimes do what they call sham surgery. They pretend they do a full surgical operation, but they don't. But the people think it was done, and they feel a benefit afterwards physically, even though nothing was changed, just their expectation, their belief.
The funny part is even the opposite works, the nocebo.
Yes, yes, yes.
And can you
Which,
just,
which, which mhm.
yeah, can you share a little bit on these? Every thought releases a chemical hormone. So there are two major hormones. One is the stress hormone, and one is the happy hormones, oxytocin, serotonin,
Mhm,
and
mhm.
so a little bit from the science point of view, when do doctors give that, and how do y'all use it in terms of medicine, and how the brain actually manufactures it as it is also.
So there's so much misunderstanding even among the scientists of the reality, which again I reveal in my book.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Coming back to the chemicals in our brain as we understand how the brain functions, and modern medicine and psychiatry, for example, which is based on modifying some of those chemicals through drugs. So you mentioned serotonin, and many of the current medications in the world for depression and anxiety work with serotonin. They're called SSRIs.
SS?
They're, pardon?
What is it called?
SSRIs, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors.
Oh, okay.
And most of them are in that family, so to speak, without naming specific ones right now. Now, this is right now almost standard practice in many parts of the world, especially in Western psychiatry. And there's very poor evidence that it does anything physically to the brain beyond the placebo effect we just talked about. But I want to come back to serotonin and again, some of the misunderstandings that even the scientists and doctors, let alone the lay public, are having right now. Most of the serotonin in our body is produced by the bacteria in the colon in our large bowel. And this is what we call sometimes the gut brain. Most of it comes from there, as in like 90% of it, not from the head. So again, the evidence for the effect of these drugs is very poor. The understanding they're based on is totally wrong. And then even more fundamentally, as I explained a few moments ago, the belief, which is unquestioned, they don't even realize it's a belief, they just think it's proven, but it's not proven, that the brain is the cause of consciousness. And therefore, if you modify the brain somehow physically, you're modifying consciousness. It's mistaken. It's consciousness over mind, over brain.
So,
It's not the other way around.
right.
So you can, in my work, for example, because I also still work as a psychotherapist, I almost never use any medication, no matter what the problem is. I use education.
Beautiful.
I teach people they can change their awareness. And with you changing your awareness, you can change what you manifest, what you do.
Right. How do you suggest changing the awareness? Do you have some tips and suggestions? I mean, we have also many, but just coming from you.
Yeah, many tips, many suggestions. But to begin with, as I teach, for example, my patients, you don't have to be how you were or even who you were.
Beautiful.
And most of us don't realize that. At our level, we don't realize. But it's true. You do not have to be who you were, how you were. You can choose how you want to show up on this level of our consensual reality. And you can envision what you need to change from where you are, where you've been, to where you want to go. And many people, have shared that the secret of their success, and they were not people who believed in spirituality or any particular religious system, but just shared that they had visualized, they had envisioned what they wanted to achieve in their careers from a very early age. And then they went on to achieve it. That is, again, a form of manifestation without them realizing it, but it is.
Yeah. Actually, everyone does this without knowing. It's just that if you're aware and do it, then it has a beautiful feeling,
Yeah. And there's so much power in it. Like, to come back to an example recently in history, the former leader of South Africa, Nelson Mandela.
Oh, yes.
So at one, time in his life, he was considered a terrorist against the current, government, the apartheid government. And he was punished very badly for it and in solitary confinement for a long time. And when the world took on this injustice to the people and put sanctions on the government and pressured it to remove again the restrictions they had on the majority of the native population, the country it really belonged to them. They were the people who had lived in it and who still did the work in it. And when Nelson Mandela was released, instead of coming out as a bitter person wanting revenge, it was the opposite. If you recall, he set up a commission for truth and reconciliation, to connect people. This is a great example, I think, too, in history of how a person does not have to be who they were or how they were. And he became an inspiration not only to his country people in South Africa, but in many parts of the world.
Absolutely. In fact, we have the Gandhian philosophy in India. He has also he dreamt of the freedom, and that's how it happened, that way. So that's and our master Guruji also, he dreamt about many, many things which is happening now, the new age, the clean India, and so many things which he was talking about 30 years back, and right
Mhm.
now we can see that happening. So it's just
And
yeah.
another example of that, somewhat more recently, in the United States was Martin Luther King,
Hmm.
and he started off with this very famous "I Have a Dream" speech.
Right.
And, it did manifest into a better reality for so many people who are so oppressed. There's still a lot of problems in that country, as we know, unfortunately. But still, his dream and his
Mhm.
expression in an impassioned way of sharing that dream, it changed the reality.
Yeah. I also have this crazy, big, huge dream is 8 billion people just having two qualities. One is taking total responsibility for their life. And then the question comes, how can we take total responsibility? Then you say, just be in gratitude. That's all. These are the two words I feel that it's so simple actually. And it's just we lose our identification, and that's why we lose out on understanding that there is so much abundance in the world, but we feel lot of us feel scarcity. So
Yes.
responsibility means I am responsible for my life. So if it is not going well, I have the power to change it. That's all. And then how do you change it? Just be in gratitude. These are the two words. Whole day and night, I dream, eat, sleep, and just share that only. Because a lot
I
of people make
mhm.
this, make excuses and complaints and finding excuses or complaints in their life. And I said, we are the most fortunate generation, I feel. And what more do you have with quantum physics coming in, proving all what the ancient rishis shared? Now the science is proving it. What more do you want, like that?
Well, hopefully they want to also live and experience it more, because people again are still in this illusion to a great degree, and very misguided. And like as I said earlier, we're in a precarious situation in our world right now. So we could go on and have a very good future for humankind, but we also might destroy it all in a very short period of time to come.
No, no, with people like you and all of so many of us, we'll have a beautiful world. Very, very. It is already there. It's just now on the manifestation stage.
Good evening, Dr. Howard. My
Hello.
question is that, yeah, my question is, as you have explained the, observer effect in quantum physics. So my question is this, that if human being is not observing and some instrument is kept, okay, and still the wave and the particle effect comes, so who is the real observer in the instrument? Or is it just an intention of that instrument that works?
Well, to answer your question, there still at some point would have to be an observer, right? Um, we can't get away from the need for an observer at some point. So even if there's nobody, for example, in the laboratory, and you just have the instrumentation all turned on, monitoring whatever is occurring in some experiment, without anybody, again, physically human being there to cause a collapse of the probability wave, still to know the actual outcome of the experiment at some point, at the end of it, if you like, it would still require some human to look at the data. So it's maybe less direct. It's not like you're looking at something and it's, let's say, changing before your eyes. It could just be that when you actually look at the data after whatever has happened, just the data that recorded it, that sort of captured it. But it still at some point requires observation. We can't get away from that. There's and more fundamentally, as I'm trying to explain, nothing is outside of consciousness. It's the source of everything.
So the
Beautiful.
intention, in short, we can say the intention is working over there. Observation, the intention of the observation is working with instrument or without instrument also.
Well, and that is correct. But even in other types of experiments, for example, in psychology and in medicine, where they also do experiments for their research, we have what we call a problem called a replication crisis. So even though there are very impressive research studies published in mainstream reputable journals, when other scientists try to replicate, to repeat those studies to see if they get the same results, they often cannot. In fact, sometimes even the same experimenters cannot get the same results, which again, back to plasticity of reality, it's not so fixed out there. It depends on a lot of other things, and it all comes back, I repeat, to some level of consciousness.
Thank you.
One,
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes. Good evening, Dr. Howard.
Hello.
First of all, thank you very much for being here for us. And since childhood, I have heard this term deja vu. And so many times it has happened with me also that
Mhm.
whatever I dreamt of in night,
Mhm.
in few days, it just happened. And exactly same situation is happening in front of me, and I'm not able to react in any other way. I am actually reacting in the same way as it was in my dream. So, growing up, it happened a lot till my maybe 13 years of age. After that, it
Mhm.
drastically reduced, and now it
Mhm.
hardly happens. So my
Mhm.
question is, so when I tried to ask someone about it, people said that it's known as deja vu. But I want to decode it. What is this deja vu? How it works? And if there is someone who really, with whom this thing happens very, very frequently, what does that mean? Thank you.
Well, first of all, um, we all have the ability as humans to have what we call psychic ability, again, like telepathy, clairvoyance, precognition, deja vu. And we're more likely in the culture we live in right now, which is, again, keeps trying to convince us that the reality is a material one and it's outside of us, and we're just a small part of the whole thing. Um, Many of us get caught up in that confusion, and we start, doubting ourselves more and more. But when we're children, we're not, self-censoring, restricting so much. We're more open. Um, and so we're more connected to source when we're young children. And as you may know, in many traditions, for example, expression Zen mind, beginner's mind. You have to be like a beginner to really understand Zen Buddhism. In Christianity, you must be as a child again in the kingdom of heaven. The same notion. You have to go back to that simplicity, where you weren't caught up so much in your expectations and your judgments. There was more of an openness. So first of all, I repeat, not just yourself, but for many of us, if we're open and have good memory, it was something that was more present when we were younger in life. And it's sort of unfortunately drilled out of us by the propaganda to believe in something very different. As to what it is, what is deja vu? So the literal definition is already seen. So although in conventional reality would say, yeah, but I was never there, how could I have seen there and even known if I go through this door or this path, what I will find when I've never been there and I don't know anyone who has been there? For me, that's an example, again, of the illusion of this material separation, and is revealing to us everything is coming from source. So when you imagine things and you think, but it was just my imagination, there is nothing beyond imagination. I mean, it is the fundamental property, or if you want to call it, power of consciousness. It's not just a source of us as humans. It's a source of everything, nature, the universe. There's nothing, beyond it. Uh, I think of it sometimes as, if to make it simpler for us to understand as humans, it's like the grand dreamer. It dreams everything up, and we're going back to Shakespeare. We're like actors, players on the stage, and it can be fun to be in a play, but it doesn't mean you have to be locked into it. You don't have to just be that actor. You don't have to just follow that script. You can improvise and live differently when you have that awareness. You don't have to be as you were.
True.
Dr. Howard, I think in the given time, I'm sure a lot of us want to know another facet of your personality. Of course, whatever we are talking, technical, psychology, parapsychology. But what I wish to ask is there, I mean, one thing that fascinates you about India, and if you have like a desire or something you wish or you have a connect with India?
Well, on one level, and you may laugh at this one, One connection is that every week, pretty well, I have Indian food. I love curry. That's, on one immediate level. But more profoundly and more seriously and more respectfully, I have such a great appreciation for your ancient ancestors, the revelations, the teachings they had, as I know in part through the Vedas. Um, in itself, I appreciated it. But now also understanding how, with all the new discoveries over the years and from learning some also other cultures, it was such a direct explanation of source. And
Yep.
so of everywhere in the world that I know of, India. And I know your country, as many countries do in our world right now, has many problems, which goes back again to ego, separation, distrust,
Yes,
competition,
true.
greed. Um, but the core teachings of your culture are like, wow. So it's totally fascinating to me. On the other side, I mentioned there's another book that I've started with. I don't know if I'll have the time to go all the way and complete it, on having a better balance with our ego. So still enjoying, as again, actors on a stage, with each other in a
Right.
play, that level of playful separation, but not getting too
Yep.
stuck in it, so that you need more
Right.
attention or more applause or a more prominent role in the play, like not getting stuck in the ego, just fun with each other. Um, so thinking of writing again this book, because I see so many of the problems now from really our emotions. And we need to learn to understand this, that when we get stuck in judgment, we're
Mhm.
already getting into separation as opposed to in acceptance.
Right.
And I find that one of the things that really helps me in my work personally is trying to work with non-attachment. For one thing,
Mhm.
everything is changing. And in a way,
Mhm.
everything on kind of the screen of our awareness on some level is just something like you would watch on a movie screen or have in a dream. Um,
Right.
not to confuse that from where it's coming from, and what else
Mhm.
can be accessed and come from source.
In fact, in India, we
Yeah.
have this
Yeah.
famous terminology for what we call it illusion. We said Maya. Maya means
Yeah.
just,
Mm-hmm.
and then
Yes.
another, like in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that everything is a Leela. Leela means it's just like Shakespeare says, it's a drama play.
Mm-hmm.
So we are just actors. And I always say we are actors, we are the producers, we are the directors, we are the heroes, heroines, whatever. And we can choose to make whatever we want to make. So if things are not working well for us, it's somewhere we have put those seeds and we can change those seeds. That's the beauty of life. And life is just an experience of all the experiences we are having. And if we don't like the experience, we have the full charge to change it. That's all. But we don't realize that it's the thoughts which we have to change. That's the seed of it. We try to change the actions, and my personally forte and love and craziness and passion is just to observe the thoughts and then beliefs
Mm-hmm.
behind that, because all thoughts are coming from the beliefs. And if we can catch that, we have so
Yeah.
many ways given to reframe the mind, and that comes by practice, consistency. So let's hear, Vishal, what's your question? Yeah.
Thank you,
So
Dr.
I
Howard.
just to repeat on that. That's what I meant by non-attachment partly too. Not getting
Yeah.
caught up in
Thank you
that
so
so much.
much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hi, Dr. Howard. Uh,
Hello.
the mental health has now become like a pandemic. So many people are struggling through that, right? And if everything is coming as an intention from the source, why is that we all from the source are getting these challenges? I mean, why are we caught up
Yeah.
more
So
and more in?
that's a good question. And as I have said, there's so much in my book. It's hard to express it meaningfully in these few moments. But I refer back also to an ancient Greek philosopher in my book, Plato, and he had what he called the allegory of a cave, where people were imprisoned on the walls of a cave inside it for many, many, many years of their life, and that was their reality. And one day, one of the prisoners somehow escapes, and he goes out from the entrance of the cave into daylight. And initially, because of the extreme change of the light intensity, he's blinded because he's been in the dark for so many years. But eventually his eyes accommodate, they adjust to the brightness, and he sees the beauty of the outside world. And then he feels compassionately to go back to his previous fellow prisoners in the cave to tell them that there's this wonderful, much more desirable world outside the cave, and that he will free them and set them, free to come with him. But when he goes back into the cave initially, he is again blinded, this time by the lack of light, by the darkness. Before he could see some vague shadows. Now, for a while, he can't see at all. And the other prisoners become aware of his disorientation and distress. And even when he recovers and adjusts again so he can somewhat see them, um, they don't believe him. They're afraid. So they remain as prisoners, not because of the physical chains that hold them to the wall of the cave, because of their emotional beliefs. And I think that's very symbolic of our problem right now. Where, as I said, I was invited recently to present a lecture on my work to the faculty at the University of Toronto. It's on YouTube now, by the way, for those of you who might be interested in this. It's very recent, just a few months ago. And I believe we're in that type of a situation right now because we have been indoctrinated with false belief. It's trapping us. And my mission in what I'm saying in the book that I wrote, as I mentioned, is to wake people up to realize this is illusion, these restrictions, these hardships. It does not have to be this way. And the way to better ourselves is not to take from others. Quite the opposite. It's to reach out and connect with others through love, through altruism. I hope that's answering your question.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just that sometimes it's easier to understand, but as you said, when we are in that pain, uh, I think we
Yes.
forget that it's Maya.
Well, life is challenging. I mean, that's not, in itself total illusion. I think it's part of it because it makes it stimulating that there's, some mystery and challenge in life. So
The,
in a way, that's, basic aspect of life. And if you appreciate that, it's a whole different thing than if you fear or resent it. It's a choice, with your awareness.
Howardji, we have a little, at least I think I got a simple solution to what his this thing is, the why it is. So if we have a community where people speak, eat, dream, sleep only this, that means how to change our thoughts and beliefs,
Mhm.
then it becomes very easy, and that's what we are actually creating. And not only the community in a large, we have a one-to-one personal, uh, not a mentor, but a hand-holding system. We call it Sevak, SEVAK. So we
Mhm.
have this hand-holding system, and if you see like the person who's there, Neerav Gopalbai. So Gopalbai is Neerav's hand-holding partner, and Vishal is Rajesh is Vishal's hand-holding partner. So everyone, we've got giving them a hand-holding person who will remind them, and each one reminds each other in the community that let's not slip. If we slip in our awareness, it's okay, but we have someone to tell us that we have slipped. So that's the system we have set up. What do you, a few words on that?
So this I relate that to what I call altruism, which is being caring,
Yeah,
loving in a sense, loving kindness, for others, in practice, not just as a prayer in our own mind, but in action as we
absolutely.
connect with people. Interesting. Back on the medical side for a moment, the doctor who developed our concept of what we call stress, how stress, affects us mentally and physically, and that is affecting so many of us in the world right now in a very severe way. It's a very stressed state right now, I think, in humanity globally. He found in his research in his later years that one of the best things that we as humans could do to reduce, to lower the stress we have in our lives and how it's affecting us is to become more aware and considerate of the needs of others. He called this developing an altruistic ego. So it's like a connection, not just, ourself internally. And when we are choosing to be compassionate with someone else, generally speaking, most of us really, first of all, emotionally feel better than we're focused on the unfairness and the misery and the pain in our own life. So it makes, when it's about focus, right? So where you focus, the energy flows. So if you're focusing on the needs of someone else compassionately, it reduces your sense of limitation and pain and adversity and so on. And it's a choice. It's just a switch in your focus of what you're choosing to be aware of. Now, medically speaking, physiologically, back to the stress hormones, we know that when you're doing this, when your mind in choosing this way to relate to someone else in need or others, in maybe a larger number of people, your cortisol level, which is a stress hormone, goes down.
Absolutely.
And your oxytocin level, which is sometimes we call it the love hormone, goes
Yeah.
up.
Yeah.
And interesting as well, by the way, back in my book, as I say, there's so much things that I have found and reveal and connect. Our heart physically can also secrete oxytocin, the love hormone. It does
Ab-
not just come from the brain or from some other glands in our body, from
Yeah.
the heart. We have it so wrong in Western understanding. So wrong, unfortunately.
Actually, not only every thought, every signal of the body sends these hormones, I feel, either or, the stress or the happy, every signal which we are getting, whether it is through heart, the gut, the brain, I mean, every cell, there's a signal going and either or is going on. So if you are highly in awareness, then you can change whatever. I remember Dr. Deepak Chopra, he says,
Mhm.
that there is some chemical which is used in cancer, which costs $40,000. It's called, uh, it starts with E. And you can get that, you can release the same chemical if you go through a Disneyland roller coaster and children release that same
Mhm. Mhm.
chemical. It's something
Mhm.
with something like that. Yeah,
Yes, we can literally change our whole internal chemistry. And in fact, we are taught, again, I'm talking the Western medical concept of how we are constituted, how we work. So we're taught we're the product physically of our genes. And this is what we inherit from our parents and the ancestors more distantly that preceded them. And we're taught that we are different physically because of our genes. So some of us are taller, some of us are thinner, some of us have more athletic ability or musical ability. And we are taught in the official version of Western science that it's all from our genes. It's all like, in a sense, preordained, but in a physical way in terms of the encoding. But we now know there's also something called epigenetics. And
yeah,
just as I say with neuroplasticity, where the mind can change the physical brain, in epigenetics, we now know too, by thinking differently, by changing your lifestyle practices perhaps as well, you can change what we call the expression, the activity, if you like, of the genes, the effect of the genes. So
absolutely.
it's like the genes, in a sense, have switches on off. So they're still there, but you can affect how they express themselves just by changing your thinking. And even really, there was one experiment done at Harvard University a number of years ago on the benefit of meditation, on how it connected with neuroplasticity and epigenetics. And they found that for people who had no previous training in meditation whatsoever, so it's the first session they're doing in a laboratory, just 1 hour of it changed the genetic performance of over 100 genes. This was done years ago. We have much more sophisticated meditation right now. So our thoughts can also change us even at a genetic level
Absolutely.
throughout the body, every cell.
Yeah. Nirav, now your question.
Hi, Dr. Howard. This is Neerav.
Hello.
Thank you once
Hello.
again for a beautiful, beautiful explanation. The most complex sounding theories were explained so beautifully. Not only the way you explained, but even your calm demeanor, the space in between your words seems to convey so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
So, I'd like to take advantage of the fact that you're a physical doctor as well, and something that struck me right now. While my wife and me, very recently had been to our dietitian, who's amongst the most well regarded in the country, And there was two polar opposites advices that we got for each other. While she was advised to sleep lesser, I was advised to sleep more than what I am currently doing. And the reason she gave was, you're mentally so active during all the waking hours of the day. You seem to be burning up all your fuel. And what I would recommend for you is to sleep well, and minimum 8 hours is what you need. Now I'm at a time in my career when I really need to work at my really at extend my hours to the most. So the question that popped up was, if I have to really work at it and be as efficient and manage within lesser hours of sleep, even 3 to 4 or 5 hours, is there any hack that one can use?
Yes,
What are your
absolutely.
tips on this, please?
And it's more, historically in your culture than mine here in the West. And that is meditation. And let me just say too, with sleep, we need sleep for our well-being mentally and physically. And that is so true. But just because we are having sleep does not mean it's always restorative, that it's always restful, that it's always beneficial. Many people have bad dreams when they sleep. Many people are physically restless when they sleep. So theoretically, it's a time of quietude, of relaxation mentally and physically. But in reality, for many people, not necessarily at all. And many people suffer from insomnia, difficulty falling asleep, staying asleep, or having what we call restorative sleep, where they feel recharged. So I would recommend more, without knowing the backgrounds, in more detail of yourself and or your wife, but I would recommend seriously meditation, because meditation does have a higher, if you like, probability of really quieting your overbusy mind and allowing your body to energetically recharge and rebalance more reliably in some ways than sleep. So I'm not saying give up on sleep completely, but if the advice is that you're sort of burning up too much and need more rest, I think a higher quality of it, and from your point of view and time management, more efficient use of your time would be through meditation.
Currently, just to add, I have been meditating twice a day for many years now. And all said and done, the quality of sleep is also quite good, if not excellent, but it's quite good. Meditation quality is also pretty good. So having done that, I'm still finding that my body still requires 8 hours. And it's only after 8 hours that I, on my own, am able to wake up without, too much of exerting willpower on myself.
If that feels for you, more naturally beneficial, I would go with it. And in terms of, the conflict or complication of having so many other things you want to get done, and you would like to use that time to maybe work more on the time management side of things and to reflect more. You may have many things that you do and attend to and want to do that you consider important, but I'm sure if you reflect more deeply, you will realize they're not all equally important. Some are more important than others. And some also require a higher degree of maybe effort or completion than others as well. And so maybe if you work with that level of consciousness when you're awake and reflect more deeply on the fact, or repeat, that not everything that you think is important to do or should do is not equally important. To think at a deeper level, what would be more beneficial overall, more sustainable?
Beautiful. So I'll
Thank
just
you.
we'll make the last few questions and just make short answers. So we'll cover all. But Nirav, just a suggestion that like he was recommending meditation. Even I say that I used to sleep also 8 hours. I made it lesser, but the compensation was meditation only. That's how I could manage getting up at 5. And now it's become a habit. 5 automatically eyes open. But for a year or two, I just meditated more times. I would meditate twice or thrice. I could meditate 5, 6 times, because whenever the eyes would close, I would close it. I would not resist and continue my work. Just check out that for a month and then see how it goes. Okay.
I wanted to ask that maybe this is coming from a space of having some mental health challenges. And I agree with your aspect of how changing our thoughts makes a difference and awareness is key. But I just wanted to ask, so the thing is, all of this seems great. And, sometimes if we're used to reflection, then we have all these ideas in our head. But then sometimes when we experience pain, all of that goes out the window because pain has this sort of tendency to trap you, and it's blinding and it's deafening, and you can't really think when you're experiencing pain. And I think that's the case for both physical and mental pain, where it's really impossible to think or feel the things like it just shuts down. And what do you do at such a point? Like, what do you do when the pain demands to be felt and when it's the only reality that you're experiencing in the moment?
A few things. First of all, everything can be changed. Everything, because all comes imagination. There are no like physical limits, material limits. But I understand, that if somebody is experiencing severe pain or chronic pain, it can be so overwhelming, over incapacitating them almost, so to speak. But just because it is like that, going back to my point, it doesn't mean it has to stay like that. Give me an example. One of the most famous Western psychiatrists pioneered hypnosis in psychiatry, hypnotherapy, was Milton Erickson. He had severe polio as a child, twice, I believe, later in life as well, and it left him in chronic pain. He learned intuitively how to self-hypnotize himself so that he could be fully aware of what served him, what benefited him, and not so aware at all of what did not in terms of the pain. And he went on from that intuitive realization and discovery how it could help himself to become eventually one of the foremost teachers of hypnosis for others. So I think he's a very good example of what I'm trying, to explain here. He definitely had a very serious challenge of physical pain that could not just be removed with medication or surgery. He did it with his mind. So when we say self-hypnosis, he was changing the way he was experiencing consciousness of his physical being. He still was in his body, but he could control which aspect of it was predominant, which was manifesting mostly into his everyday awareness. And we can all learn to do something like that. Just as I said earlier, we don't have to be as we were or who we were, but the same thing applies to us with physical challenges and health conditions. I'm a doctor, but I'm now 77, and on this level, I'm human, I'm mortal. I have vulnerabilities, and I've had all types of medical challenges over the years. And in many cases, the physicians or surgeons I consulted gave me a prognosis, a medical prediction, so to speak, from their assessment that was fairly negative in terms of what I could expect. And internally, I never bought into that belief system. And it turned out that their, professional opinions did not end up being correct because I chose not to make them correct.
Right. Beautiful. Beautiful. Yeah. So, you just take in whatever supports, whatever doesn't support you, we need to have the capacity to let it go and don't get into their story, although however scientific it may be.
It's non-attachment, as I say, is one of my fundamental, ways that I keep myself in more balance. Everything changes, everything's impermanent. Nothing is outside of us.
Oji, thank you very much for your deep insights and wisdom. So,
Thank you.
since we run a lot of children program and children are already into that alpha state or the qualities which you say, it's very prominent, for them. So, how do children remain that? Because children, as even this Amruta shared that, she was having that quality till 13, and then so what would you suggest? Because if children, like we have a Gurukul and we run programs and all, so how can children be, because compared to adults, children are in their dream world, they are in their imaginary world more compared to the adults. So from the manifestation angle, that should be manifesting more for them. So what suggestion do you have for children and for adults to remain in that state? Or
I think, fundamentally, it's about our whole educational system, how we educate. As I mentioned, earlier a few times today, everything ultimately is coming from source, from our imagination, if you want to put it in those terms. And yet in our educational system, when students are not paying attention to the teacher, when they're not paying attention to what's projected maybe on a screen or on a blackboard, they're usually reprimanded and they're told to pay attention. This is the wrong direction because you're telling them, don't spend time in a closer level to source and imagination of other possibilities. You're asking them to really restrict their focus, to not use their own ability to reflect, to reason, to think, to choose. So contrary, and this is broadly in many educational systems right now, we need to also look to children more at times as a potential source of wisdom, that we as adults would seek their opinion. What do you think? I don't mean whether they want something or not on that level, but I mean the affairs beyond them. What do you think would be a better thing for us to do? And we invite that, with adults. Some of the work I do too in the corporate sector, where I'm a consultant, is training people to be able to think more creatively, to be able to innovate, and really trying to teach them as adults the skill which is so natural to children. So, if we even literally had children sometimes come into some of, believe it or not, our meetings, and give us their opinion, on how they see, how we're discussing and what we're considering. I think especially right now too, with global climate change, which is a very sad and very, again, ominous reality, I feel we owe it to the young children to give them a voice now about how we are conducting ourselves and how we utilize energy, and how we are producing all of these toxic products and polluting all aspects of our ecosystem. I think they should have a voice in this.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Yeah, hello, Mr. Howard. This is Rishi from Mumbai.
So,
I have heard, I know, and I do believe in this. There are two types of world. There's energy world and there is matter world. When I was really small, before I could even know the meaning of the pill or a medicine, my family used to force me to, whenever I was sick, they used to force me to have medicine. And I would always tell them, I don't want medicine. You give me time. I would just sleep. I would not eat. And in 1 or 2 days, I would be all right. Uh, till say 30 years, I never had a pill before that. And now also whenever I get some cold or cough or anything, I tell my family, I don't want medicine, and they behind me, take a pill, you get all right. Why you taking it seriously? Something bad will happen, and especially after COVID, people have become really fearful. Anything small happens and they are like, you can't change whatever however you feel like. And I tell people, you're taking continuously pills, check yourself, if you can reduce it or you can change yourself. Or then when I have a talk with them, they think I'm from different world. So I would like your opinion or your comments on this.
it's complex, in our time that we have right now, but let me say that on this, again, level of reality, we do have the experience of us being in a physical body. We do have the need to consume nutritional substances, food, and there are, many of the medications, the drugs that are produced right now, chemically, synthetically, are originally from plants, from plant medicines. And indigenous cultures, it was just a part of the culture, that they would have certain things to make them stronger, or again, help them be more balanced in some other way for something that was affecting them. So it's not that, drugs in themselves are all bad and wrong. If we understand the source of them and if we have proper relationship with them, then they can serve us. But when we artificially depend on them, instead of making wiser decisions and changes, and or become, as some unfortunately be even dependent and addicted to them, that's again when the balance is lost and we're getting too entrapped in that illusion that that's the way to be, well.